What I love about today's story is that the brilliant, wise King Solomon, even he learns something new by interacting with people around him. And so much we learn by others' examples, and they inspire us, they uplift our souls as well. This story is called King Solomon's Dinners. And once again, it's from the book Stories from Our Living Past, which was created by Berman House. And again, this book goes back so many decades ago, but I will always take it off my shelf because it's still, so many of the stories ring true in terms of valuable lessons for us today. One night, a foreign ambassador visited King Solomon's palace. The king served him a lavish feast, but feeling very tired that evening, Solomon treated his guest coldly and hardly spoke to him. After dinner, the ambassador frowned. "Tomorrow we will discuss important matters," he said. "Of course," nodded Solomon, and went off to his royal bedchamber to sleep. But the next morning, when Solomon awoke, he was no longer in his room or in his palace. He was lying in the gutter of the marketplace. Overnight, the king had been turned into a beggar. Dirty, tattered rags covered his body. His beard was matted and greasy, and soon his stomach felt empty. At twilight, a rich merchant was hurrying through the marketplace. Now this merchant rarely noticed beggars, but on that day he tripped on a stone and quickly looked to see if anyone was watching. The merchant saw a filthy old man at his feet, and suddenly he recognized the beggar as King Solomon. "Your Majesty," he cried, "what tragedy has brought you to such a miserable state?" "I'm not sure," sighed the king. "Perhaps I'm being taught a lesson, though I do not yet know what it is." "In that case," smiled the merchant, "I will give the banquet tonight. Come home and dine with me so that I may have the king of Israel as my guest." Solomon eagerly followed the merchant to his mansion. As soon as they entered the dining room, servants brought in platters of roast lamb, pitchers of wine, and bowls of raisins, fruits, and almonds. "My only regret," said the merchant, as he piled food on his plate, "is that this feast seems so meager compared to the wonderful feasts you used to give. Does it not sadden you, my poor king, to think that you will never, ever give such glorious banquets again? It must be terrible to know that you will be poor and unhappy for the rest of your life." The merchant went on in this way until Solomon's throat was so choked with tears that he could hardly swallow. "I suppose I'm not as hungry as I thought," he said sadly, and left the merchant's house. The next morning, King Solomon awoke in the gutter, dirtier and hungrier than before. Once again, he could find nothing to eat all day. He stared hungrily at the vegetables, hoping that some charitable housewife would give him a few fresh greens. That evening, he met a thin old man carrying a sack of onions on his back. Now the onion seller was a poor man, but each night he wandered through the market until he found a beggar to share his simple meal. He led the king to a thatched hut, where he served him a bowl of thin onion soup, and only then did he ask his guest's name. Reluctantly, Solomon told him his story. But unlike the merchant, the onion seller broke into a broad grin. "Then there is no reason to worry," he cried. "You yourself know what God has promised King David's descendants. They will always rule our kingdom. Surely you will be king again. It's only a matter of time." Smiling happily, the king drank a small bowl of soup, then thanked his host. "I am sorry for the plainness of the meal," said the poor man, "but I can only afford what I bring home from the stall. Then it was Solomon's turn to grin. "I cannot thank you enough," he said, "for you have taught me more than you know. Listen, 2 nights ago, an angel came to my palace disguised as a foreign ambassador. I treated him so coldly, so God put me out on the streets to learn this lesson. Yesterday evening, I dined on meat and wine, but the food was seasoned with unkindness and tasted as bitter as ashes. But tonight, this thin soup seems sweeter to me than the finest raisins and almonds in all Israel, because it was seasoned with generosity and with love." Brilliant, brilliant message.